Shall we start, Lily?
Yeah, I don't think anyone else.
So I think Lily doesn't need any introduction because she spoke to us before. So she's one of us now. And also she told me, if I repeat, she told me this is one of her most favorite places to talk.
Yeah, it was really. I had a really nice experience.
Okay.
So
that's why we are very happy to have her here again. And now she's going to talk about one of her recent projects, Memorializing War.
Okay. Thank you very much. I mean, I'm going to sit down, but also get up sometimes to show something or to stretch my legs. This all came out of some funding that was given to me to write a paper with 2 colleagues, and it was to do with war memorials and museums, just to see how various conflicts that the UK has been involved in are memorialized, how they want to be remembered, and why, and how it differs perhaps from other countries, the way they're remembered there. I was hoping that today there'd be more people from other countries, so I could ask the question, how is war remembered and which wars are remembered in your country? But I would like to start, because I'm Greek and this was my first experience of how war is remembered, to just say that regarding 20th century wars that Greece has been involved in, which is only 20th century because there's nothing in the 21st, it's mainly World War II memorials, and shortly after, for example, this particular memorial that I can pass around as well, is a Holocaust memorial. So it's in the island of Kerkyra, which is Corfu, and it's basically a family. It's the civilian memory of how entire families were exterminated in the Holocaust. And we will see how in the case of Britain the Holocaust is also remembered. This is another very typical memorial, again in Greece. It's in a town called Kedilia in northern Greece, and it's basically the names of people executed by the Germans on the 17th of October 1941. Because Greece was occupied for 4 to 5 years, there are lots of these memorials around in areas where they did these executions, which unfortunately were quite common. Another similar memorial is in Piliou, which is in central Greece. This is in a square called Sacrifice Square, and it says it was in this cafe that the Germans, the occupiers actually, it doesn't say the Germans, the occupiers would gather our compatriots to execute them. Okay, so that's another one, very similar. This is from the island of Sifnos. The names on this stone are of military people from that area, from the islands, who were killed in the war, against Second World War. And the latest one I found, in terms of, chronology, 1949, is this one. And this is something that was erected not long ago with money from the communist parties of Greece. And it is a memorial to what they call the fighters of the Democratic Army of Greece. So these are men who were killed in 1949, who were fighting, they were, I suppose, communists, you could call them, then they fought Greek forces and possibly British. And that is the latest one I have found. Everything else is really to do with heroes of the Greek Revolution during Ottoman times and something like this, but there's nothing after that. We will see that in the case of Britain that is quite different, and that there are reasons for that. So, memorializing war. So how war is remembered, and how is that connected to the fact that this is a country that had an empire, much more recent than, say, the Greek, which was, say, the Byzantine Empire. Fairly recent empire. How is that informed by power, by this country being a power, still an important power in the world? And how historical framing works, and by historical framing I mean the way that past and present are connected and shown as being progressing in a linear way. So something in the present, a past event may be framed in a present narrative. Okay, so let me go to my first slide. So I'm starting with the royal family because Interestingly, in this country, we have almost a triangular relationship between power, the military and the church, which are all connected in the big first family of this country, which is the royal family. Because the king or queen is also the head of the army and is also the head of church. So the king, when I first wrote this, it was the queen, but in this case the king is the head of the armed forces. He's also the commander-in-chief. And all members of the royal family have various appointments and honorary ranks in the armed forces. Queen Elizabeth II had her first appointment in 1947 on her 21st birthday, and she was appointed Colonel-in-Chief of the Balaclava Company, 5th Battalion of the Royal Regiment of Scotland. She held during her lifetime over 50 ranks and appointments, which you can see here. She, throughout her life, was visiting military bases, both in the UK and overseas. In 2009, the Elizabeth Cross was introduced, which is an award that recognizes not those who died, which is normally, you know, who it goes to, but this is the families of those who died as well. So we have, you know, an extended honor. The families of those who died in military operations or as a result of terrorism since 1948. Okay? So the king, it was announced when the latest king became king that he would be taking the following affiliations. So, don't need to read them, just take a look. So this is what the king was taking on.
Busy man.
That's a lot, very busy, very military, okay? That's not all. The queen was actually taking on, this is the Majesty, the Queen. She has a range of affiliations, so Colonel-in-Chief of...
You mean by Queen, are you referring
Camilla.
to Camilla?
Yes, yeah, the Queen. So his Queen would
just
take
wife.
his own, yes, his wife. So Colonel Grenadier of Guards, Colonel-in-Chief of the Rifles. Okay. The Prince of Wales, oh, hello. The Prince of Wales will also be taking these additional appointments. That's Prince William. And he wouldn't just take on these appointments, but he in fact served in the army as platoon commander in the Blues and Royals and as an RAF search and rescue pilot. The Princess of Wales, so this is Catherine, took on all of these as well, these appointments. And she already had some existing military appointments, so there's, you know, there's kind of lists for everybody, okay? And other military appointments that were announced were the following: some for the King, for the Queen, Prince of Wales, Princess of Wales, Duke of Edinburgh, Duchess of Edinburgh, and the Princess Royal. Okay, so everybody has a military appointment. This is very interesting. For somebody who comes from a country that doesn't have a royal family, that was quite interesting to me. How the royal family that could be, you know, like the first family, also is so involved in the military. And in fact, something that a lot of people I know actually watch every year, and some of my colleagues as well, Proving the Colour. It is a really big celebration. If you go online to find out what this is, if you don't know, it says it is a spectacular British tradition. Okay, it really is a spectacle. Celebrates the monarch's official birthday. Again, it is about the military, but it also coincides, it's also connected to the birthday of the king. It's an experience that shows the unity and pride of the British Armed Forces and the royal family. There's a nice picture of members of the royal family watching there, the little boy with his ears, very cute, everybody watches that. There are always lots of pictures and who was wearing what, it is a spectacle, actually, but again, very much connected to military operations and claims, especially. The poppy, I mean, I don't know if anybody here, I didn't notice if anybody was wearing a poppy, but this is the time.
You just forgot.
This is the time when people start wearing the red poppy. Again, I found that years after moving here, that it's important to wear it, especially if you're on television. You need to be shown to be wearing the poppy. And it's about remembering the heroes. And on Remembrance Day that is coming up, this is what we're supposed to remember, but really we're supposed to remember them all year round. And these heroes is something that really stuck on my mind, and because at first I thought, heroes, what heroes? So it really is all military people, heroes, not anybody specific that got a medal for heroism, it's all of them. Now, let's look at the UK. The UK in the 21st century has been involved in a number of wars as part of the war on terror. So we have invasions in Afghanistan and Iraq, and occupations of Afghanistan and Iraq. We have war crimes that have been committed in Afghanistan and Iraq. And we have continuing remote warfare in many parts of the Middle East. Regarding the war crimes, I mean, you could say, well, war crimes, was anybody convicted? No, nobody has been convicted for war crimes in these countries. But the International Criminal Court in 2020 published a long report about British war crimes in Iraq. And I don't know if anybody here has read it, but I have read it. And the kind of war crimes that it mentions are all types of murder. This is of men in custody. This is not going out as a soldier and shooting. This is men in custody in a particular camp in Basra that the British were in charge of. And these were men that were murdered. Some of them were murdered, some of them were raped. They were tortured in a manner of ways. And the International Criminal Court, after writing this report, just closed the case because it said, well, it's up to the British now to do something about this. The British were not willing to do something other than send money to the families of these people. And so kind of compensation. But nobody has been tried, so the image was not tarnished of the heroes. The hero torturers, the hero war criminals, that wasn't tarnished. So, although this is the more recent history that has been written, that Britain is writing about its armed forces and about its wars, it is written again in a particular way that doesn't really address this. For example, these invasions, the names of these invasions, if you know what they were, the invasion of Afghanistan was called Operation Enduring Freedom. And the invasion of Iraq was Operation Iraqi Freedom. So these were not really liberations, really, of these countries by the British. So they're shown as liberations when they're addressed, but not as really invasions or occupations, and certainly not in terms of war crimes. For those of you who may not know, or may knew and forgotten, I'm also the primary researcher of an NGO called Iraq Body Count. So when it comes to Iraq, I actually recorded for many years civilian deaths by all perpetrators, including British forces. Not those in custody, but those that were bombed or shot, died from these kinds of causes. So, imperialism. Now, this is very much still, in many ways, although the empire ended less than 100 years ago, it's still a very imperial nation. And that does affect the way it treats wars and the way it treats the victims of these wars and the perpetrators of violence. So what is imperialism? Well, it's a system where a powerful nation conquers, controls and exploits, which is what Britain does. It conquers, it controls and exploits one or more colonies, usually on other continents. imperialism also is very much connected to nationalism, in a sense of pride in the accomplishments of the empire, of the imperial nation. It's not, so the imperial nation, when it acts to conquer, control and exploit, doesn't elicit feelings of horror in its people, but of pride, and it's seen as an accomplishment. This is how we became strong and wealthy and big, and you know, we created an empire where the sun doesn't set. That wasn't said with shame, that was said with pride, and it still is. When anybody says it, it's, oh, you know, look how powerful we became. It's a success story, and that affects everything about how the past is remembered and how the present becomes part of that glorious past that is seen as continuing. So, how does imperialism work? Well, the point is to extend power and influence. And it can happen through colonization, it can happen through using military force, or by other means. You know, we know that cultural imperialism happens without necessarily any use of military force. It can be political, economic, it can be cultural. So when European powers, not only this one, but generally European powers took over lands, they felt superior to the natives and looked down on them. They sought to change them, to civilize them, to spread the good European civilization, so that those people could be enlightened, educated, and it was what was often called the white man's burden. I have to say the Greeks have a similar story to tell about things that happened many, many years ago, for example by Alexander the Great, who went all the way to India with his army to enlighten people, to spread the knowledge of and civilization of the Greeks. And this is definitely how I was taught. Well, I was taught about Alexander the Great and the Macedonian Empire, that it was, you know, they were there to, and people were waiting for them and welcoming the armies, you know, because they were doing good things. It was the moral army almost. So this is how imperialism works, and this is how the invading armies, who are really killers, are treated by the compatriots as heroes and as accomplishing wonderful things for the nation. So the way imperialism and nationalism are connected is in the ways they affect memory, how the nation remembers. Every nation, of course, has a myth of its golden age. For Greeks, for example, the golden age is 5th century BC Athens, you know, Pericles and all these the tragedies and the comedies and democracy, the birth of democracy. So that's a golden age for the Greeks. But all nations have golden ages. And we now are reminded of these golden ages through, for example, memorials that we see, through museums that tell us of that wonderful past, through tales of heroism and of ancestors of ours as being heroes, through education, the way we are raised in school, how we are taught about the past, who we are taught our ancestors were and what they did, and how we should strive to be like them. There are, of course, political narratives that pretty much link what is supposed to be an objective past to something that's not objective at all, but is very much political. And oftentimes, different regimes will use the past in different ways to fit their own political agenda. And finally, we have, especially in times of war, we have a patriotic discourse that acts as a glue to mobilize the nation, especially in a crisis against an enemy. We see that a lot of people have written out about Russia at the moment, how Putin was able to mobilize the national psyche against the Ukrainians, against Ukraine. by creating a patriotic discourse that's actually very much what we call memory politics. So it's very much politicized, it's a politicized memory in the specific way that the Ukrainians are remembered. So the past is, but how it's presented changes, what it means changes, and it can be used by different regimes to remember certain things and to forget other things. They don't become part of the memory. For example, the war crimes in Iraq that I was talking about will not become part of memory, part of history for this country. So, British imperialism. Well, the British Empire was vast. It was an empire for 5 centuries. It took off a quarter of the world's land surface. So that is a big golden age for the British. They ruled over 400 million people. They were very effective in shaping cultures and economies. Museums are full of looted artifacts. If you go to the British Museum, you know, you find all sorts of things. And I remember the first time I was in the British Museum and I saw these things from other countries and I thought, how did these things get here? You know, from Egypt and from, I mean, the biggest shock for me was not long after Iraq was invaded, I saw there was a new exhibition in the British Museum, the Mesopotamian exhibition. It was looted things from Iraq, exhibited. There, I was really upset. I got very, very upset in the middle of the British Museum just looking at that, and I thought, I have to leave now, or I will destroy them or something. So,
and Greek stuff, of course.
There's a lot of Greek stuff
Parthenon,
from the 19th century, yes, yeah. The Elgin marbles. So they are exhibited in museums as some kind of history. Oh, look at the history. Oh, Mesopotamian history. Look, Mesopotamian exhibition. But those inequalities that the empire produced are not in the past. They continue to this day. I was about a year ago at an exhibition by an American artist who created, so she's a black American artist, and she had created some designs for Wedgwood pottery. Very, very beautiful, but it was something connected to slavery. So we had a discussion about colonialism and you know, how people are used. And somebody said, oh yes, well, we're glad that is over finally. I said, excuse me, that is not really over. If you look at the world, the way the world is today, these inequalities that allowed for that to happen, allowed to happen even now. So then we started talking about Gaza. You know, and some people were very upset, and because they were trying to celebrate something. That event was supposed to celebrate the end of all that, and I said, it hasn't really ended. It's created something that persists. So there is a patriotic history that aims to bring those imperial values into generations that will continue to have those values. There are role models for the children as they grow up, you know, various great men who served for Britain, who served the imperial nation. And the Commonwealth, which still exists, it could have not existed, but it does. And it's a vehicle of paternalistic influence as a source of this military strength. Which is very big here. Compared to other nations, this is very pronounced here. And I think if anybody ever lives in another country, they will realize how pronounced this is, this idea of military value and military strength in the UK. So what is militarism? Because I'm going to argue here that militarism, this militaristic society that exists here, is at the core of how wars are remembered and memorialized. So militarism is a condition, this is a quote from Mackenzie, in which war or the preparation of the means of war are major social concerns. Okay? and they command a significant portion of resources and enjoy a substantial degree of legitimacy. And it's a propensity to use military power for political settlements. So I can tell you, because I'm a member of a committee of the West Midlands political education, military education, sorry, that is very important. I'm part of a committee that tries to get British universities to channel their students into the military, to have military, to join the army, to join the navy, to join the RAF. So,
why are you on that?
I was invited to be in that committee because my research area is primarily war. But not that kind of war, a sort of human security approach to war. I study the impact of war on aspects of human security. And they think that, and maybe I'll be successful in this, that I can take part of that military education from my angle. And I welcome that, so I thought, okay, I accept. I'm going to be speaking to cadets about what war is and what it should be, perhaps.
How much? How much?
How much?
How much are they paying you?
They're not paying me anything at all. So the preparation of the means of war is indeed a very big concern here. And I know that every year, you know, there's pressures from the military to allocate more money to the military so they can continue campaigns. That this is not enough, we need more money for defense. Look, you know, now with Russia especially, you know, and more money has gone to the military. Okay, because we need to be ready to go to war as though this country wasn't already at war for a very long time. But just in case. So more money. So militarism can be understood in three different ways. It can be understood, first of all, as an ideology. So militarism as an ideology glorifies war, glorifies military institutions, and values, martial values. They're considered possibly the best values, those of soldiers. There are 20th century writers, from Mann to Enlow, that define militarism as involving a set of values and beliefs. So, first of all, this is what militarism is, a set of values and a set of beliefs about what is glorious, what is heroic, what is worth pursuing, what is moral, you know, and is connected to military. A second understanding is behavioral, is about the propensity to utilize force to resolve conflict. So then using military force is not the last resort, but it's actually the preferred resort. So if there is some sort of conflict, some sort of disagreement, using military force is the way to solve it, is the way to go. So intervening forcefully, especially in the domestic affairs of other countries, which we know this country does a lot. And the third one is about military build-ups, increases in weapons production, imports, military personnel and military expenditure. We see that more and more in the UK actually, especially now within NATO. There's a lot of requirement to say, oh, we're not strong enough, we don't have enough, we need to have more. We need to have a stronger army, more money, and intervene more, but also train, you know, because the British are very much involved in training militaries of other countries as well. Most significantly, I was invited to a formal dinner where there were going to be a lot of military people, and I wanted to bring a student of mine who is from Yemen. And somebody said, oh, maybe not bring the girl from Yemen. I said, why not? He said, well, because, you know, we are training Saudi Arabia really to, and so maybe it would be a little bit awkward. And I thought, oh, okay, fine. So I didn't bring her, but I told her what was said to me.
Maybe next time you'll take
She was a little upset. Okay. Military in this this country definitely is very much connected to a sense of ethics. What is morally right? What is morally outstanding, or what should be admired morally? So military ethics are used to make the use of violence easier to commit and to accept after it's been committed. Military ethics help the violence used to become legitimate for those who took the decision to send the army somewhere to wage a war to have legitimacy. And soldiering is shown as the acme of moral commitment. Those who perpetrate that violence as part of militarism are seen as pursuing, making an ethical effort. So the idea is that the rest of us, we don't see these as criminals or as violent people or as anyone committing an atrocity, but actually as someone strong and ethical. The army becomes strong and ethical. And the ethics themselves can function as a weapon of war. This was written by Eastwood. Eastwood is a very good author. He's written a book about Israel and the Israeli army. So primarily he focuses on how that army is seen as a moral army. And that in itself becomes a weapon. So the ethics are used then to create a moral army that claims moral superiority over the enemies, and the enemies then are seen as evil, maybe genocidal, maybe terrorists. And when the moral army uses violence, because it will, the army uses violence, that is sanctioned violence, that is justified and always portrayed as defensive. So the violence of the army, even in an invasion, is not seen or defined as aggressive, but always defensive. We saw that in the war on terror, especially, it's defense from terrorism, and therefore is justified. We see now with Israel, the force it's using, which is even worse than Iraq, is seen as well defensive. We have to defend ourselves from terrorism, is the story, and it is not the only. Israel is not the only country that has told that story. Britain has told it, is telling it as well. So there is a type of militarism that this author called Coates calls crusading universalism. And it is a type of imperialism, this crusading universalism. It masquerades as universalism, but it's actually moral particularism. So it has a morality that serves, you know, the one who commits the violence or is a militarist, but it pretends that it is universal. Okay, and is used universally.
For democracy.
Is it called democracy?
It's Western values.
Yes, yes, you could say that, but it's that type of imperialism, the forcing of its values or its will in a way that appears to be a crusade. It's for the good of the others. But what happens is a particular moral community then wins over another. Okay, because the one that is a crusading universalist has to be victorious, has to win over the others, and the inferior moral community can become higher by taking on the morality of the crusader. It masquerades as altruism, that we are there, we are Operation Iraqi Freedom, we are going there to free these Iraqis from their dictator, because it's really killing them. But actually, by saying this is altruism, in fact, every limit that can be placed upon war is removed. It becomes limitless. Because as long as this is altruistic, and this is done to help others, we're not going to limit it, we're not going to limit the good that we do, it becomes limitless. And a lot of methods are used that are actually against international humanitarian law, including war crimes. Okay, so it becomes limitless. Now, morality, the church and the military. An example I give here is a picture I took myself when I attended something. They took us to Gloucester Cathedral afterwards. And this particular room made an impression on me. You know, you have the usual church things that you would see, I don't know, in a Greek church. You know, you have the crucifix there, this man was the Son of God. But that is where the similarities end. Because here is a wreath of red poppies. That's a military symbol. You wouldn't see that in the Greek church ever, anywhere. So that impressed me, as well as these military things here. Here, normally you would see angels there or something. But this, on the side, other side of the crucifix are the poppies, and then on the windows you have Egypt, Gloucester, in memory of 8,100 all ranks of the regiment who gave their lives for their country, in memory of 723 officers and so on. So there is, even visually, a connection between power, the military, and a sort of official morality. This is the official morality within militarism. This is the culture of militarism, which even in a church you see that. You can't escape it, it's all connected. And therefore, if you were to reject it in one place, immediately it has a ripple effect on everything, and people can attack you from all sides if you reject any of this, because it's all connected. When it comes to soldiers, there is always a prestige in this country. Now, I don't know if you see, they're everywhere now for heroes, money for heroes. There is a constant reminder of how important it is to have a good and powerful army in order for the nation to survive. There is a moral culture that must prevail. Through war, the nation must always enlarge its sphere of influence. That still exists here. That is not over just because officially the empire is over. We have the crusading, we have the liberal democracies, which you brought up, and of course it is a feature actually of liberal democracies, of this, which this is one.
Time being, anyway.
Sorry?
For the time being, anyway.
Yes, with the reform things may change.
Yeah, absolutely.
But will it be a good change, a bad change? We're accepting that what we have now is good, and I'm arguing it isn't. Unless you like militarism. So, when you have a positive crusade, you have a desire to create a new system, whereas a negative one is to root out and destroy an existing evil. So the form it takes is, there is an evil there, we need to go and root it out. Whether that is a dictatorship or it's I don't know, an aggressive state, Russia, for example. So there is an evil there, and we need to go and take it out. And at the heart of these endeavors is an arrogance, thinking that we can eradicate dangerous regimes, while simultaneously imposing our own values and our own democracy. When war is viewed in that way, then war does not become instrumental, so a method through which we will achieve a change somewhere, but the war in itself becomes an end. So war in itself is, because of these grandiose ends, becomes transformative and redemptive. Okay, not just an unfortunate means through which we will have changed somewhere. A better humanity is created through war, so war itself is a wonderful thing. And when somebody dies in the course of a war like this, of course, it is a form of martyrdom. And I want to say here that militarism is not only a feature of a state's army. That it has in common with non-state armies. For example, terrorist groups, because they also have this militarist aspect of the martyr. When I say this to students, they don't like it because they say, well, you can't say that the army is like a group of terrorists. If it's militarist, yes, they have that in common. The military, the non-state armies, non-state fighters, believe in exactly the same thing. All these things that I just said about the army, the non-state armies believed exactly the same. And they justify exactly the same things in a limitless way. Okay, so let's look at some memorials now. In memory of a glorious dead. Okay, this is a typical thing you see on a war memorial. This is the one that's closest to where I live. This is a memorial of the church at Kiel village. Oh, you recognize it. Cease not to praise God for these men of Kiel who fell gloriously. All year round is got wreaths of red poppies. And there are various sides to it. Some are for First World War and some are for Second World War. And it's always, you know, the men of Kiel village. And it's always men, by the way. There's never any women appearing in this. So that is the closest to me. And again, you can see we have to praise God. This is outside of the church. Again, we have the connection of the military, the glory, praising God for them, and it's at the church. Right here is the entrance to the church. This is a memorial from the National Memorial Arboretum. I don't know, have you been to that? It's in the Midlands. It's huge.
In Staffordshire.
Yeah, it's a huge, huge place. Acres and acres. It's full of memorials. This is an interesting memorial. This is in memory of Falkland Islanders. Doreen Bonner, Mary Goodwin and Susan Whitley. Now, these were all British women living on the Falkland. They were civilians. They lost their lives during the liberation of Sandy, Falkland Islands, June 1982. Now, these three women were all killed at the same time, in the same house. They were the only civilians to die in the Falklands War. You see that, you're thinking, the Argentinians killed them. No, the British killed these women. A British ship, sorry?
Collateral damage.
Yes, a British ship killed the only civilians that were killed during that war. It doesn't say that though. By seeing that, you say, oh, they lost their lives.
It's irrelevant.
It is irrelevant. You would think that, oh, look what happened. They killed these British women. One of them was an elderly woman as well, just trying to protect themselves from the shelling. So that's an interesting memorial. I was recently at a military meeting with someone who was actually in the Navy, a career Navy officer. And I showed him this. He didn't know that they were killed by the British. He learned that from me. And I said, you know, isn't it your job to know this? Even he didn't know. They're not told this. There is a central area in this arboretum where you have walls and walls and walls, where there are name after name after name of soldiers killed from the First World War to now, so the last 100+ years. So I was looking at these names and then I noticed that they continue to now. I know that in 2009 the British removed forces from Iraq. And I thought, okay, so where did these people die? Where did... And so I asked somebody. There were various people there who worked for the Arboretum. They didn't know. Finally I found somebody. She said, oh yes, everybody here, the more recent ones here, they're from training accidents, or suicides, you know, some sort of accident. And I said, oh, you put them there? And she said, yes. I thought, that's interesting. It made me question every other name I saw there, if they're including accidents. So the soldier who died in an accident is put there in the Wall of Heroes, like it fell gloriously in a war. So if you ever go, take a look at that. I would recommend going to that Arboretum. In the Arboretum, there is something called the Basra Wall. That was particularly recent to me because I had documented deaths of civilians in Basra at the hands of a number of perpetrators, including the British. So here there are the names of British soldiers who were killed in Basra. Again, we have honor. This is the language of war. Honorable age does not depend on length of days, nor is the number of years a true measure of life. Okay, so in memory of British personnel who died in Operation Telic, and those coalition personnel killed in southern Iraq. So this is again a place where we go to admire these heroes who died occupying the country after killing 7,500 civilians. Because I work for Iraq Body Count, I can tell you how many civilians were killed in the space of 6 weeks that Iraq was being invaded in 2003. 7,500 civilians. And this is now a celebration of an army that did that. Again, this is a very, what we call memory politics. There is also at the Arboretum this bench. Again, I know in this country it's quite common to have a bench with a little plaque on it memorializing somebody. This is memorializing Jamie Hancock, a young man who was killed in Iraq. He was a soldier. He bravely gave his life for Queen and country in Iraq in 2006. I know 2006 was one of the worst years in Iraq. In the space of a year, there were about 30,000 civilian deaths, killings, because we tend to only include violent deaths, not deaths from hunger or illness, which I'm sure are a lot more. And he was killed there, and they are commemorating this. And this is pictures of him, you know, he's dressed as a soldier. So this is how that war is remembered. This is the history now that is being created regarding that war in Iraq, that invasion of Iraq. This is something I have recorded. This is a coalition killing of 19 civilians. This is an entry on Iraq body count. 19 were killed by coalition airstrike south of Tikrit. There were 2 missiles that were dropped on a farm compound where families were sheltering. So these were families that lived in Baghdad, and because Baghdad was going to be bombed, they took their children to this farmhouse to escape that. What happened was they dropped missiles on the farmhouse, and these are the people that were killed. There was a 2-year-old killed, several were children. The first 2 children, Lina and Mohammed, were the children of a man who came to us to tell us about this incident. We didn't have that on our database, and he told us, and he gave the name of the other people who were there. And he gave us pictures of his children, which are the only 2 pictures that appear on the Iraq Body Count website. Okay, so this was the reality of that war. And those are dead that are not remembered. Although Jamie Hancock is remembered, of course, because he was part of this glorious nation, these people are probably close to rubbish. Nobody needs to remember them. Even I have been criticized over the years for collecting this information and documenting these days, because they say, well, what do you care? You're not Iraqi anyway. Why do you care about that? Kind of, what a waste of time. Why are you wasting your time documenting this? Who was Lina and Samira and all these people next to Jamie Hancock? The kind of killings from Iraq that this country wants to remember are killings from something like this. So this is a car bomb from Baghdad that is in the Imperial War Museum. This is an exhibit. So there was a real bombing by a terrorist group, we don't know exactly which one, probably Al-Qaeda in Iraq, could have been, where they put a bomb inside this car, and they parked this car outside in an area where there are bookshops, and they killed over 30 people. I think there were 37 people. We have that on the Iraq body count database. And this is important for this nation to commemorate in that war, because that shows how evil the other side is, and why, you know, the army needs to be there to protect people from these evil monsters who blow up cars and kill innocent people who are in a cafe, in a bookshop. Okay, so that is memorialized. It's very important. So in the Imperial War Museum, that I spent almost a day in there, just going to see everything that they have. There are a lot of remember words. Remember us. There is something called the Holocaust galleries. You know how I said the Greeks remember the Holocaust, they have this statue. Well, that is actually, it's a very moving room, the Holocaust room. And a lot of names appear. So it's not just a bombed up car that killed 37 people, because they don't think that the names of those 37 people should be mentioned, because those people get given number 37. But when it comes to Holocaust victims, they give names. A lot of names appeared, including of children. There are pictures of children who died in the Holocaust from all sorts of countries. As you can see, there are different names. These are all names of children. There is a floor that commemorates the extraordinary heroes. That is the term used, extraordinary heroes. And the words used there are national pride, ethos, courage, honor, medals, brave acts, and inspiration. So we have to be inspired by the courage and the ethos of these extraordinary heroes. And there are 7 categories that commemorate the different types of bravery. For example, boldness, aggression, leadership, skill, sacrifice, initiative, and endurance. So this is how we are supposed to think of warriors, British warriors. There are all these things. There were a lot of people on that floor, and you could see some people were even tearing up, looking at medals. There are medals displayed of extraordinary men who won them through leadership and boldness and all of these things. And sacrifice is a good one. So this is very powerful stuff. And for me, because okay, I'm British now, but I wasn't born British, and I'm able to look at this objectively. For people who are born and raised British, this is really powerful, and it becomes part of their pride even in themselves, in being British. This is very, very powerful. The Greeks have something similar, not as powerful as this, but of course every country tries to create that in its citizens. The language of war. So how is war remembered? There's always a specific language used, specific words. For example, liberation is a really good one, especially when you are dealing with an aggressive army that goes to various places of the world and kills people. You have to show that as a liberation. The war on terror is a good term. It was not a war against Afghanistan or against Iraq or Yemen or whatever. It's war on terror, so it's a good war. We are fighting the terrorists. These various wars of imperialism, especially in the 21st century, are presented as the various virtuous acts of a benevolent hegemon. So it is a hegemon. This is, you know, there is pride in that power. We are a hegemonic power, but we are benevolent, a benevolent hegemon. We use our power for the good. We mean well. We have a good mission. A lot of the memorials use these words: glorious and glory, heroes, justice, devotion, sacrifice, and bravery. This is the language of war. Definitely here, maybe in other countries too, but definitely here is what I've seen mentioned a lot. By the way, if you're wondering about the number of war memorials that exist here, there are over 100,000. So although there is one nearest to me that I showed the Kiel one, there are many others that are a little bit further, but we're kind of surrounded by those everywhere. When you leave Euston Station, there is a war memorial just in front of you. So historical framing is what happens when you have a commemoration of, say, a war where the British were moral. You know, they were fighting a defensive war. You can't say, you know, it wasn't Nazi Germany. And they won. It's their side won. And that is then becomes part of a narrative of an uninterrupted linear past and present. So that continues to now. And even with the poppies, for the heroes, you know, there is always a connection to First and Second World War. Because the current soldiers, we can't think of them as criminals. They have to be the same as these people who were fighting a defensive war. And that is historical framing, and it happens a lot. And so past sacrifice becomes present sacrifice, past glory is present glory, and past power in present is present power. We have that uninterrupted connection. Because if the World War II were heroes, well, it must be that the Afghanistan are heroes, and the Iraq are heroes, and, you know, the Falklands are heroes. They're all heroes. They're all the same. So in memory politics, we have a past that then is created, is a constructed past. We are looking at the past and we are constructing it in order to create an identity and an othering, you know, create something about who we are and who they are. And it becomes also the basis for national nostalgia. And this is interesting because nostalgia is a Greek word. There are many Greek words. I'm always good at remembering these words, and I had a classmate who used to make fun of me here in Britain, that he was opening a dictionary, looking up the things I was saying, because these came naturally to me, Greek words. Anyway, so you have a national nostalgia where all this wisdom and courage and virtue that is inherited is longed for and has a lingering romanticism. So we have a past that is romanticized, and we are recreating it now in order to have authenticity and continuity from past to present. So every generation almost has that mission to recreate, to continue to recreate a past and present that is based on nostalgia and romanticism. And that nostalgia means that, okay, we know that in the empire there were some things like slavery and, you know, but still, that was a golden age. That is the nostalgia, it's the pride in the achievement. And so the past is constantly giving new meanings. Any conflict in the past are made to fit present perceptions of who we are and who they are. And everything new that happens is understood in light of the nation's past. So anything that Britain does now has to be understood within that story that Britain tells itself about what it is. So one causes the other, the present causes the past causes the present. They're constantly renegotiating with each other in telling stories that fit the story about who the nation is, and who they came from, and where they're going, and what missions suit the national character, which is always good missions. So all these memorials, including this memorial, which is in the centre of Newcastle-under-Lyme, which is the nearest city to where I live, so there are poppies on the other side. I took a picture that didn't go, but there are always poppies there. It says, you know, we have to remember that they died for our freedom. It's all about remembering, it's all about memories, but do we really remember? What is it that we remember? We look at that, and other than an emotional response, what is it that we actually remember? And I would say we remember what we are told to remember, that we should be remembering, and forget probably a lot more than we remember. And that is not true memory. And yeah, that ends my presentation on how war is remembered in this country. Thank you. You're going to do lots of sport, you'll be very fit, you'll travel to all these fantastic countries, you'll train other people, it will be wonderful. they really present it as a wonderful experience with almost no reference to actual fighting or killing anybody. So this is how it's presented. And because there are lots of these people coming to the university, and I actually get their leaflets and everything, this is what they show, really fit people climbing mountains, skiing, you know, all these wonderful things.
And also, if you remember
That doesn't show anybody dead.
you know, sometimes they have adverts on television. Join RAF and join
See the world.
And most of the adverts are about like learn a new skill, how to fix a car, how to make an aeroplane, how to, I don't know, how to join a climbing, these kind of things. So none of these things on those adverts shows anything about aggression. But actually, to be in the army, more than anything else, you are there because you want to fight.
You need to be prepared to kill. If your country says you need to now go to that country and kill somebody, but of course nowadays you're less likely to do that in the way that it was done before, because probably you will kill through a drone. So you will be in a safe space yourself, and you'll be seeing something that happens far away and kill people far away from yourself. You won't even experience the death in the same way.
That is true, but at the same time, as you very well know, you know more than us, because you covered the conflicts in Iraq, like Afghanistan, Iraq, and even the ongoing war in Ukraine. Even though drones are used heavily and then those kind of long-term, long-distance fighting, but still many people fight on the ground. And
not British people.
In those wars, in Iraq and Afghanistan.
In Iraq and Afghanistan. I mean, in Afghanistan, in Iraq, for instance, something to add to what you said. You said many immoral things happened, like in prisons or in shootings, civilians, especially those torture things, interrogations, and later on we learned more about this. What happened during the war on terror, which is different, which is new from the previous wars, both Americans and the British use private contracting companies. And the Blackwaters in America, and those, is it called C4, the company which provides prison officers as well in this country. So C4, most of the interrogations, most of these dirty jobs were done by those private contractors. And by doing this, if they do anything wrong, it wasn't the army, it wasn't the official state. I mean, they were, and also none of them were named. Many hundreds of them were killed, for instance, those private contractors. But neither American army nor British army or state, they have a record of them. Almost like they didn't exist. But I looked at the war on terror period from 2001 up to 2021. Always, from the beginning up to the end, always, both in Afghanistan and in Iraq, there were more private contractors than the official members of the army in both war theaters. They do this, first of all, because it is economically more profitable, it is neoliberal, but also they do this politically, the blame goes to them. Do you agree with this?
I didn't know. Yeah. What you just said is news to me, that there were more private contractors than actual soldiers. That is interesting.
I prepared actual charts for my new book. I look at the charts. Like I said, something like in Afghanistan, there were about 130,000 private contractors. And in Iraq, again, there were always more private contractors than, and because most of these private contracting firms also connected to Bush administration. I mean, like Blackwaters and another major company, Donald Rumsfeld was the chief director just before he joined the administration. And many people, and there was a direct correlation. These these private contractors are not coming from small unknown places. They are major big companies, multinational companies with huge amount of money. And therefore these companies also, if you look at the same period, the election period in the United States, they paid the Republican Party the largest amount of money. And the Republican administration gave them these jobs. But of course there were always like the political calculation, also economic calculation as well. Because at the same time, even from mid-1990s onwards, in America, they were cutting and cutting the size of the army. And at the beginning of the war on terror, I think again Donald Rumsfeld made a speech, and in that speech he said that in this century, the real effective war needs a small army using every single functions and every single resource effectively. And this is exactly what they did. They sent relatively smaller number of forces, but they paid other people to do the dirty work. Yeah.
Because of the business, they are connected proxy wars.
Exactly.
All companies.
And this is what happened in Iraq later. So to begin with, of course, because Iraq was occupied for almost a decade, there were in fact British soldiers there. Some were killed. That Jamie Hancock was there in 2006 and was killed. However, after they left, when bombing resumed in 2014 because of ISIS that went into Iraq, it was all done through drones. No soldier was killed. After 2014.
And they used other forces like...
And they used local forces, local people, as you were saying, delegation. It's the 3 Ds, darkness, delegation and distance, are the way Britain fights wars now.
Yeah.
And also there was a process like this. After the war started, after the initial few years, both in Afghanistan and in Iraq, when the actual soldiers realized those private contractors are paid much more, like something like 5 times more than an actual soldier's salary. Many soldiers resigned from the army and joined the private contracting companies.
I knew somebody at Kiel, so at Kiel University we had a student who used to be in the British Army, and then he decided to do a degree. He left the British for health reasons and decided to do a degree, but then he got the opportunity to go as a private contractor back to Iraq. He made a lot of money.
Yeah, I know.
And that was the motivation. They offered him a lot of money to be part of a company.
Just on the soldiers who come back, I was at a meeting with my trade union actually on Monday, and they had a speaker from a veterans organisation who's got a veterans charter. British, yeah. And he's talking about the he reckons British soldiers, after they leave the army, they don't get the support that they need in terms of preparing for life outside, in terms of finding work, or how they've sort of been institutionalised because they join when they're kids. They're often, usually, he says, the non-officers are have no qualifications to speak of, because if they did, they'd do some other jobs. So very working class kids who go into the army, spend however long they do in the army, they come out, they're not really prepared, he reckons, for civilian life, and they get zero support. Plus there's lots that have been traumatised in lots of ways, and high levels of suicide, high levels of homelessness, and so on. So that's something it's perhaps worth pointing out to people who are kids, who are thinking of going into the army, that it's not all rosy as a result. Plus, I mean, there was a program recently, wasn't there, about the torture in Iraq. I forget exactly. There was a documentary about reporting on the atrocities which British soldiers had committed, and the cover-ups there've been in Iraq specifically, and Afghanistan.
There is an inquiry at the moment at the Royal Court of Justice about Afghanistan, the SAS that killed children, and then planted weapons next to their bodies to pretend that these were Taliban.
But I thought your brilliant lecture, by the way, this talk, I thought it was really, really good and really interesting, and it's dealing with stuff that isn't often discussed. It occurred to me that these war memorials, and you're right, there's thousands and thousands, everywhere you go there's a war memorial.
And all churches have some kind of war memorial.
You see it's sort of like, it's transparent, the relationship of the different arms of the state and the church. The Church of England particularly, which is an official church, and the King not only is the head of half the military regiments, he's also head of the church. Yeah. So he's literally the equivalent of the Pope to the Roman Catholic Church. He plays the same role as far as the British Church is concerned.
Yes, and also head of the armed forces. Head of
the armed forces. So he's head of the church, head of the armed forces, the top political figure as well. So that one person embodies the sort of three arms of the state. Anyway, but the war memorial thing is a 20th century phenomenon, more or less, isn't it? Because they're all from the First World War. You'll see hardly anything. I have occasionally seen stuff about the Boer War,